Now, how many people have heard of emotional intelligence? Okay, fabulous. EQ came onto the scene in the 80s, actually 85 first, but it wasn't really popular until 95 when Daniel Goleman wrote a book about that, right? How many people have read Daniel Goleman? Anyone? Okay, great, wonderful. If not, it's a pretty easy read. It gets a little academic. He's a professor at Rutgers, but let me give you the Reader's Digest version, okay? Really smart people don't always succeed. It's not always the smartest person in the room that gets ahead. You figured that out, I'm sure, already. I see nodding heads. Okay. What you need to do instead is not only be smart, I mean, that's a given. You do need to have IQ, but you also want to have this emotional intelligence and understand how to get along with people. Because at the end of the day, business is really about relationships and developing good relationships and trust and all of those things. So we start with self-awareness. And until you know who you are and what you're good at and what you're not good at, you don't really have a basis for growing, right? You have to sort of know where you are now. And that's the first step. Awareness is the first step, so they say. And then secondly, you need to know what to do with that. I'm thinking of my poor manager at Equifax. I used to go into his office and just vent and get all upset, and you'll see why when we get to the different leadership styles. You'll figure out what mine is. and the man would listen and just say, yes, Laura, yes. And then he would say, now what do you think you are going to do about that after I vented, right? So you have to have some self-management. Fortunately, we had a good enough relationship where we could do that. But sometimes you can't always say what's on your mind, yes? Or you need to think through, how could I be more effective? Some of us are good at analytical things and numbers, and some of us are better at public speaking. In today's world, with all the complexity, I submit to you that we need to get better at everything, right? That's sort of the good and bad news. So we do want to build on our strengths, but we do need to figure out how to shore up our areas for growth and development. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more how. The social awareness is really, how do I get along with other people? How do I understand where they're coming from? And then how do I manage those relationships? So I like to call that people whispering, right? You've heard of the horse whisperer. It's a little corny, but it works. And so the 4 steps are, first, I understand myself. I understand my strengths, my areas for growth, and then I people read. So I understand where someone else is coming from, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, how do they need to be communicated to. And then the 3rd step is I really speak to them in their language. I partner with them and speak to them just like a foreign language in the way that they can understand it. So if I'm talking to someone who's very bottom line oriented and numbers driven and I'm not, I need to adapt and shift and talk to them in a way that they can really hear it. That makes sense? You're all nodding, so you've had that experience. It's not easy, always. And then 4th, once they feel comfortable with us and we're on the same page, as it were, then we can partner going forward together, okay? So that's the people whispering process.